The moment my father-in-law slid the manila folder across the dining table toward me, the entire room went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a family gathered for Thanksgiving. The other kind, the kind that presses down on your chest like a stone. I looked at my husband. He was staring at his wine glass. I opened the folder. Divorce papers, notarized, already dated. I'd like to tell you that I screamed, or that I stood up and threw that folder across the room, or that I said something sharp and devastating that left everyone in stunned silence, but I didn't. I sat there at the head of that long mahogany table, surrounded by his family and the people I'd believed were my people too. And I read every single line slowly, carefully, the way my mother taught me to read anything important before I signed it. And then I looked up at my husband again, and this time he met my eyes for exactly 2 seconds before he looked away. I picked up the pen his father had placed beside the folder. I signed. What none of them knew, what no one in that room knew, except my best friend Sophie, sitting 3 chairs down, with her hands folded in her lap and a small brown envelope tucked inside her jacket, was that I'd already made my own plans. That I'd known for 11 days that the folder my father-in-law thought was the end of my story was actually just the last page of someone else's. But let me go back to the beginning, because you need to understand what kind of family the Hargroves were before you can understand why that Thanksgiving dinner changed everything. I met Daniel Harav at a mutual friend's birthday party in downtown Chicago when I was 28. He was funny and warm, and he called his mother every Sunday, which I found charming at the time. We dated for a year and a half before he proposed. And when he took me to meet his parents for the first time at their home in Napeville, a sprawling brick colonial with a circular driveway and a garden that looked like it employed 3 people full-time, I told myself that the slight chill in his mother Gloria's handshake was just nerves. That Mason Harav's habit of talking over me at dinner was just the way older men from his generation communicated. That the framed photos of Daniel's college girlfriend, Vanessa, that were still displayed in the hallway of his childhood home were simply an oversight. I was 30 years old when we married. A certified public accountant with my own clients, my own lease, and my own retirement account. I wasn't naive. I just wanted very badly to believe that love was enough to build something solid on. The first time Gloria asked about children, we'd been married for months. We were sitting in her sunroom after Easter dinner, and she set down her teacup and said, very pleasantly, "So when can we expect to hear some good news?" I told her we were enjoying being newlyweds and that we'd start trying when the time felt right. She smiled and said, "Of course." And then she said, "Daniel's father had his first son at 26. The Hargrove men tend to want families young." I let it pass by our first anniversary. The questions had become a drumbeat. Holidays, Sunday dinners, random Wednesday phone calls that Daniel handed me halfway through with a look that said, "Please just handle this." Gloria would mention a neighbor's new grandchild. Mason would make comments about legacy and continuing what we've built. Daniel would sit beside me saying nothing. And afterward in the car, he'd squeeze my hand and say, "You know how they are. They don't mean anything by it, but they did mean something by it." That was the thing Daniel never quite understood or never quite wanted to. 14 months into our marriage, my gynecologist told me I had polycystic ovary syndrome. Not severe, manageable, but it meant that conceiving might take longer than average, and it would require some monitoring and possibly medication. Cried in the car for 20 minutes, called my mother, and then went home and told Daniel everything. He held me that night. He said all the right things. He said it didn't matter, that we'd figure it out together, that he loved me and not a timeline. I believed him. I should have paid more attention to the phone call he made to his father the following week. I didn't hear all of it. I was in the kitchen when his voice dropped low in the living room. And by the time I walked in, he was talking about something else entirely, but I heard one sentence before he changed the subject. "I don't know yet, Dad. I just don't know." I filed that away somewhere I didn't want to look at. The second year of our marriage was a slow erosion. Mason started calling Daniel directly without going through me to schedule family dinners I wasn't specifically invited to. Gloria began sending articles about fertility supporting lifestyle choices to my email address without comment. Just a forward with no subject line. At one dinner, Mason said in front of 6 relatives that he hoped Daniel would make a decision before it was too late. And when I asked him what he meant, he looked at me with something like pity and said, "I mean about your future, Rachel, as a family." Daniel said, "Dad, come on," which was the most he ever said. I had 2 good friends during this period. My mother, Linda, who drove up from Indianapolis every other month and took me to lunch and listened without offering opinions unless I asked for them. And Sophie, my college roommate, who worked as a family law paralegal and who had, over the course of many long phone calls, begun quietly educating me on things I told myself I didn't need to know. "I'm just keeping you informed," she'd say. "Information doesn't commit you to anything." I told her she was being dramatic. She said, "Maybe, but you should know that Illinois is an equitable distribution state, and you should know that the house you two bought is in both your names. And you should know that if Daniel ever Sophie—" I know, but just let me finish. Let her finish. I listened, and I put all of it in the same place I'd filed that overheard phone call. The Thanksgiving dinner was Mason's idea. He called it a family celebration and told Daniel it was a chance to bring everyone together. There would be 22 people. The Hargrove cousins, Daniel's brother and his wife, Kaysen's business partner and his wife, a handful of family friends. He'd reserved the private dining room at his club, a wood-paneled room with oil portraits on the walls, and a coat check attendant who knew everyone by name. I wore a navy dress and my grandmother's pearl earrings. I brought a bottle of wine I'd spent too much on. I smiled at everyone when we arrived. Sophie was there because she and Daniel's cousin Marcus had been dating for several months. She sat beside me during cocktail hour and didn't say much, but at one point she leaned close and said, "How are you feeling?" I said, "I was fine." She said, "Good, stay fine. Whatever happens tonight, stay fine." I looked at her. "What do you mean, whatever happens, Rachel?" Gloria appeared at my elbow in a champagne-colored blazer, kissing the air beside my cheek. "You look lovely. Come say hello to Mason's partner, Harold. He's been asking about Daniel." I followed her, and I lost Sophie in the crowd. And I spent the next 40 minutes making small talk about commercial real estate and the bear season and whether the club's chef had changed the stuffing recipe. And I told myself Sophie was being dramatic again. So as a family law paralegal, she saw the worst of things every day. It colored her view. We sat down to dinner at 7 o'clock. Mason was at the head of the table. I was seated 3 chairs to his left beside Daniel, who seemed quieter than usual in a way I had learned not to name. The first 2 courses passed normally. Turkey, sweet potatoes, green beans with almonds. The cousins arguing about football. Gloria refilling glasses before anyone asked. It was after the plates were cleared and before dessert that Mason stood up. He tapped his glass. "I want to say a few words," he said, "about family. I remember thinking this speech was oddly formal. Talked about legacy, about what the Harav name had taken generations to build, about how every generation had a responsibility to carry something forward." His eyes moved around the table as he spoke, touching briefly on each face, and when they landed on mine, they stayed there just 1 beat too long. "Sometimes," he said, "we have to make difficult decisions. Not because we want to, but because love for the people we've built something with requires us to be honest, even when honesty is hard." He reached beneath his chair and placed a manila folder on the table. He slid it to me. "Daniel and I have discussed this at length," he said. "This is the right thing for everyone." The table was very quiet. Not surprise quiet. Waiting quiet. The kind of quiet that meant most of the room already knew. I looked at Daniel. He was looking at his wine glass. I opened the folder, took my time. I read every page. My hands were steady, which surprised me. My grandmother's pearls were cool against my throat. Somewhere down the table, I could hear someone shift in their chair,